The execution of Shehzade Mustafa is one of the most painful events in the history of the Ottoman Empire. Historians still debate whether Shehzade Mustafa was truly guilty or whether he was falsely accused. Today, I'd like to present a few interesting historical facts about this prince, his personality and death, sourced from Turkish archives. Shehzade Mustafa was the eldest surviving son of Sultan Suleiman. Wise, brave, and generous, he was beloved by the Ottoman soldiers and the people. He reminded them of his grandfather, Selim the Grim. Many hoped that this prince would succeed his father on the throne and bring new victories to the Ottoman Empire. However, Shehzade Mustafa and his son's fates ended tragically. In 1533, at the age of 18, Mustafa received an important appointment. His father entrusted him with the governance of the Saruhan Sanjak, with its capital in Manisa. This province was considered the most prestigious among those ruled by Shehzades since it was the closest to the capital. Typically, Saruhan was assigned to the Sultan's primary heirs. Mustafa governed Saruhan for 8 years. In 1541, he was transferred to govern the Amasya Sanjak, and Saruhan was given to Hürrem Sultan's son, 20-year-old Shehzade Mehmed. Officially, it was announced that the Sultan made this decision because Amasya was a problematic province, and the eastern borders needed protection, for which Mustafa was the most experienced Shehzade. However, who knows the real reason? Perhaps father and son had already begun to clash, and the transfer to a less prestigious Sanjak could be interpreted as a demotion or a sign of lost trust. In 1549, Mustafa was again reassigned, this time to Konya, where he governed until his death. What did Shehzade Mustafa look like? There are no surviving portraits, but we do have his depictions in Ottoman miniatures, illustrations by Ottoman artists tied to various events. In these miniatures, it's clear that Mustafa had a beard. This is interesting because only the Sultan had the right to grow a beard, while his sons did not. Some sources say that Mustafa grew his beard to prove something to his father, to show that he was confident and didn't need to follow all the rules and traditions. Allegedly, certain statesmen influenced him to make this decision. As for his personality and character, we can say with certainty that Mustafa was highly educated and brave. Italian diplomat Bernardo Navigero provided fascinating information about Shehzade Mustafa, which I'll recount here. Mustafa is the first son of Sultan Suleiman, born of a Circassian mother. He currently resides in Amasya, near the Iranian border, and it is a 26-day journey from there to Istanbul. His annual income amounts to 80,000 ducats. His mother also lives with him and takes all possible precautions to prevent her son's poisoning. She says that poison is his greatest threat, and he has nothing else to fear. It's said that Mustafa deeply loves and respects his mother. The people greatly admire Shehzade Mustafa and want him to become the next sultan. It's evident that the Janissaries also wish for Mustafa, an honest, generous, and brave prince, to ascend the throne. The Janissaries can approach him with any request, and so far, no one has complained to the Sultan about his governance. Mustafa frequently sends his father gifts of fine horses and gold ducats, and he clearly does so with joy. Until now, he has not taken any actions against his father. However, various circumstances may shift favor towards Shehzade Selim. Hürrem Sultan and the highly influential Rustam Pasha are plotting in this direction. Rustam Pasha places his close associates in the most important positions. He appointed his brother to the rank of captain and will ensure he doesn't lose the position. If necessary, Rustam Pasha will replace him with another loyal person, as blocking Mustafa's path to the throne is his top priority. Shehzade Selim is located very close to Istanbul at that time. He governs Saruhan Sanjak. If he survives and both his mother and Rustam Pasha remain alive, they may succeed in putting Selim on the throne. This succession issue promises to be quite bloody. It's difficult to determine whom the Sultan wishes to see on the throne after him since they are all his sons. However, his Russian wife is always with him, and she constantly promotes her own sons while insulting Mustafa. The year was 1553. During one of the campaigns against Iran, due to Sultan Suleiman's illness gout, the army was led by Rustam Pasha, which caused discontent among the soldiers. Rumors spread among them that Sultan Suleiman intended to pass the throne to Mustafa, but Rustam was preventing this. At the time, Sultan Suleiman was already in possession of letters between Shehzade Mustafa and his enemy, Shah Tahmasp of Iran. These letters became the main reason for Mustafa's execution. Tensions between father and son had reached their peak. The Sultan believed that, with the Shah's support, Mustafa planned to overthrow him, seize the throne, and exile him to Demotica. just as Selim the Grim had done to his father, Sultan Bayezid. But Sultan Suleiman could not allow such a thing. In the letter from Shah Tahmasp, he agreed to support Mustafa's overthrow of Sultan Suleiman, and they planned to solidify their alliance through a marriage between Tahmasp's daughter and Mustafa. Historians still debate whether the letter Mustafa allegedly sent to Shah Tahmasp was real or a forgery created by Rustam Pasha. However, Shah Tahmasp's response was genuine. The letter was intercepted on its way to the Ottoman Empire by Rustam Pasha's orders, and he presented it to the Sultan. This letter is still kept in the archives in Istanbul. Both in the series The Magnificent Century and in real history, Mustafa was warned that he might be executed in his father's camp. In reality, this warning came from Kara Ahmed Pasha, the husband of Fatma Sultan and one of Mustafa's most loyal supporters. Mustafa did not believe him or, if he did, was not cautious enough and entered his father's tent unarmed. To execute someone, especially a Shehzade, permission of fatwa from the Sheikh-ul-Islam was required. Suleiman obtained this by cunningly telling Busud Effendi a story. The essence of the story was, what should a master do with a slave who wants to take his property, claim his wife, and then kill him? The Sheikh-ul-Islam unequivocally replied that such a person must be executed. Thus, permission for the execution was granted. The execution took place on October 6, 1553, when Mustafa was 38 years old, during the Iranian campaign. Unaware or perhaps refusing to believe such a thing was possible, Mustafa rode up to his father's tent and dismounted. He intended to greet the Sultan and kiss his hand. Upon entering the tent unarmed, 7 mute executioners attacked him immediately. Mustafa managed to fend them off, but then Zal Mahmud Aga, a famous wrestler and palace servant, attacked him from behind and succeeded in overcoming the fiercely resisting Mustafa. This moment is depicted quite accurately in The Magnificent Century. Later, Zal Mahmud Aga would become a pasha and marry Selim's daughter, the son of Sultan Suleiman. Some accounts claim that the Sultan was present in the tent during the execution, hiding behind a curtain and even speaking to his son and giving instructions to the executioners. Was this true? Historians disagree on this point. For example, historian Ismail Hamid Danizmend argues that the Sultan was not in the tent. When Shehzade Mustafa entered the tent alone, he was surprised to find that his father was not there. It was at that moment that the 7 mutes attacked him. Rumor has it that these same executioners had once strangled Grand Vizier Makbul Ibrahim Pasha in the Topkapi Palace. Possessing great physical strength, Shehzade Mustafa called for his father's help and fiercely fought the mute executioners. Finally, the monster known as Zal Mahmud grabbed him by the arms. Meanwhile, it is said that Mustafa's stable master responsible for animals and one of his commanders waited outside the tent. They may have heard Mustafa's cries for help and wanted to enter the tent, but both were immediately captured and killed. The exact whereabouts of Sultan Suleiman and his 2 other sons, Selim and Sihinger, at that time remain unknown. However, Venetian sources claim that Suleiman was in the tent. When Mustafa tried to greet him, he allegedly replied, "You dog, you still have the audacity to greet me," and then signaled the executioners to act. The entire time they struggled to subdue Mustafa, Suleiman remained behind the curtain in the tent. Realizing something was wrong, he shouted, "Hurry up." Had Shehzade Mustafa managed to escape the tent that day, Ottoman history might have been entirely different. The Janissaries, 5,000 soldiers had accompanied Mustafa, would have defended their lord and, most likely, placed him on the throne. After the body of Shehzade Mustafa was brought out, it was placed near the tent on a Persian carpet. His personal treasures, tents, and livestock in the army were confiscated by the state treasury. The death of Shehzade Mustafa caused a great stir among the soldiers and the public. This shocking event was widely discussed even in Europe. To prevent the Janissaries from revolting, Sultan Suleiman was forced to remove Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha from office the same day, as the soldiers considered him the main culprit of what had happened. However, Rustam's dismissal was temporary. He regained his position as Grand Vizier 2 years later. But Mustafa still had a son, Mehmed. The life of the 6-year-old boy ended in the same way as his father's. A truly nightmarish scene is depicted in Magnificent Century, where the child is placed in a carriage and taken away from his mother. A slightly different description of these events can be found in the works of military historian and translator Fairfax Downey. In most sources, and even in the series, it is said that Shehzade Mehmed was executed some time after his father, when the entire family moved to Bursa. Allegedly, Suleiman was still uncertain whether or not to execute his grandson. Some claim that Hürrem's advice influenced this decision, while others say that the Janissaries, chanting slogans that little Mehmed should become the new sultan, were to blame. However, what Downey writes, if it is indeed true, suggests that the execution of the grandson was premeditated. According to Downey, the young prince and his mother were in Bursa. A eunuch, sent by Sultan Suleiman for this bloody task, cunningly lured the boy with a promise of a horse ride. This happened right after Mustafa's execution, at a time when even Mustafa's family had not yet been informed of his death. Taking young Mehmed to a deserted place, the eunuch showed him the sultan's decree that he was to be executed. The little boy did not resist at all. He had been raised since infancy to obey the orders of his grandfather, the sultan, and his father. These commands, regardless of their content, were law to him. In any case, no one can definitively say whether Shehzade Mustafa was guilty. If he truly corresponded with the Shah, then under Ottoman law, he was guilty, even if the intended harm was never carried out. And it's unlikely that Sultan Suleiman ever regretted his decision, especially since Rustam, who had been removed from office due to the Janissaries' outrage on the day of Shehzade Mustafa's execution, was reinstated as Grand Vizier 2 years later.